The sound wasn't a crash. It was a heavy, wet thud that moved through my teeth, down my spine, and into my fins. I turned my light back toward the tunnel. The tunnel was gone. Just a wall of broken limestone and a gray cloud of silt rolling toward me like smoke in slow motion. I held still. Moving through that cloud would stir it worse, and I needed to think, not thrash. My regulators clicked steadily, hump, hiss, hump, hiss, and I focused on the sound. Slow your breathing. Panic burns gas. Gas is the only thing keeping this from being a very bad day, so let's not burn it. I'm Harvey McFoca. I'm 33, I'm a technical diver, and I just made a decision I was deeply regretting. Let me back up about 12 minutes. I'd been running a sea cave on the south coast, a tidal system I'd dived twice before at low water, both times without incident. I was in side mount that day, 2 tanks clipped one on each hip instead of stacked on my back. It's the configuration you use when the passages get tight. The tanks can be unclipped and pushed ahead of you through a restriction. Smart system, designed by people who'd apparently been in exactly this situation and had the good sense to think their way out of it and then write it all down. I'd read the manual. I just hadn't fully absorbed the part about knowing when to turn around. The rockfall had sealed the primary exit clean. I could see it in the fracture lines. This wasn't debris settling. This was a closure. My rule of thirds was already gone. For anyone who doesn't dive, the rule is 1/3 of your gas in, 1/3 out, 1/3 held back as a true emergency reserve. The cave-in had erased that plan entirely. I checked both gauges. Right tank, 1,800 pounds per square inch. Left tank, 1,650 pounds per square inch. Not a disaster. Not comfortable either. And the tide was turning. I could feel the surge picking up, the water pushing me patiently inward. The ocean doesn't hurry. It doesn't need to. I followed the surge. That's counterintuitive, I know, but water moving inside a flooded cave is moving toward somewhere. I let it carry me through a low crawl that scraped my right tank hard against the ceiling, squeezed past a pinch point that got my shoulders involved in ways I didn't enjoy, and then the passage opened upward and I broke the surface. A cavern, roughly 15 feet across. The ceiling arched highest near the center. The air was stale and cold and smelled like a place that hadn't been breathed in a very long time. I pulled my regulator out and just breathed it. I'm not someone who performs faith publicly, but I was alone inside a rock with the tide coming in, and there wasn't a rational explanation for this room being here in this exact spot with enough air to matter. So I said what I actually felt. Look, I want you to know something. God led me to an air pocket in there. I'm giving him the credit for that one. That's how I said it later. Right then, alone in the dark, it was quieter than that. Just gratitude, real and uncomplicated. Then I put my regulator back in, because the ceiling was moving closer and I had work to do. I tracked the water line against the wall with my light. The pocket was shrinking, roughly an inch every 8 minutes. Call it 45 minutes before it was gone. I needed to find a way out, and I needed to not burn all my remaining gas, proving that passages didn't exist. First dive. I dropped back under and swept the eastern wall. The percolation hit immediately. My exhaled bubbles punched into the ceiling and knocked loose silt that drifted straight back down through my beam. Visibility dropped to almost nothing inside 30 seconds. I was navigating by touch and compass, one hand on the wall, reading the rock by feel. The passage narrowed to a slot I couldn't fit a single fin through sideways. I turned back. Right tank down to 1,100 pounds per square inch. Left at 1,050 pounds per square inch. I floated on my back in the dark and let myself think about Sarah for a minute. Not a big cinematic moment, just the actual memory from that morning. Her in her old university sweatshirt at the counter, holding her coffee with both hands because she's never been a morning person and she's never pretended otherwise. The dog losing its mind about something in the backyard. Our youngest laughing at it, that full, uncomplicated laugh kids have when nothing's complicated yet. I'd touched her shoulder on my way out the door. That was it. That was enough. Get home. Third dive. I went back to the eastern wall, but this time I dropped lower, below the slot, following the base of the rock rather than its face. That's where the old passage was, smooth-walled, ancient, bored by drainage from before this was even a sea cave. A fossil tube. Roughly 3 feet across, angling upward at about 20 degrees. I unclipped my right tank. If you haven't done that move underwater in zero visibility with silt settling on your mask, I'll tell you it's about as elegant as it sounds. I extended the tank out ahead of me, gripped it at arm's length, and pulled myself into the restriction behind it. The tube pressed against both shoulders at once. I moved by pulling with one hand and pushing with the other, inch by inch, trying not to torque anything or brush the walls more than necessary. The walls released me after about 25 feet. I clipped the right tank back to my hip and followed the tube upward. That's when the suit failed. A ledge I didn't see caught the left ankle. Hard enough to snag, hard enough to tear. I felt the cold instantly. Water pouring into the ankle seal, flooding up through my legs. The suit's thermal and buoyancy layer disappeared from the knees down in about 4 seconds. I went heavy. Not drifting heavy, anchor heavy. Like someone had clipped a weight belt to each calf. My fins were pulling against dead legs. My shearwater vibrated against my wrist. 700 PSI on the left tank. I've heard other divers describe that alarm as a gentle nudge, a reminder to start heading home. Those divers have never been inside a rock with flooded legs and 40 feet between them and open water. I finned harder than I've ever finned in my life. The tube bent upward. The walls fell away. And there, maybe 30 feet out, was a color I'd stopped expecting to see. Blue-green. That specific turquoise that only exists when shallow water has direct sky above it. I drove toward it with everything I had. Legs that weighed twice what they should, shoulders burning, left tank bleeding its last reserves into each breath. Hump, hiss. Hump, hiss. I came up through the surface. Gray afternoon sky. Cloud cover. Cold, salt air that tasted like the best thing I've ever breathed. I treaded water for a moment and just existed. 2 gulls were having a disagreement on a nearby rock. They paid me no attention. I respected that. I sat on flat stone above the tide line, my tanks unclipped beside me, my suit still draining. I was covered in percolation silt from collar to fin. I genuinely looked like something that had been filtered out of a construction site. I was shaking, cold and everything else. I looked at the headland for a while. Then I called Sarah. She picked up on the second ring. I could hear the coffee maker. Of course I could. "Hey," she said. "How was the dive?" "So," I said, "here's the situation." A pause. Harvey. I found an unmapped fossil passage. Ancient drainage tube, pre-sea cave formation. Genuinely cool discovery. I'm going to write it up. And a rockfall sealed my primary exit while the tide was coming in, and I had to do 3 scout dives on a shrinking gas supply with a flooded suit to find it. Silence. Then, carefully, "Are you out of the water?" I'm sitting on a rock. I look terrible, but yes. "You're going to tell me the full version when you get home." Yes. "It's worse than what you just told me." Somewhat worse. Yeah. I could hear her processing that. She doesn't panic. She calculates, and then she decides how scared to be. I wanted to be honest with her, and I also didn't want to add to what was already a lot. "Look," I said, "I want you to know something. God led me to an air pocket in there. I'm giving him the credit for that one. The rock fall, the flooded suit, the 3 questionable decisions that put me inside a rock at the wrong stage of the tide. That's all mine. That's 100% Harvey." She was quiet for a second. Then she laughed, small and short, but real. "Come home," she said. "Already walking," I said. "My name is Harvey McFoka. I'm a technical diver, and I make questionable decisions so you don't have to learn from them the hard way. If you're new here, welcome. Hit subscribe, and maybe say a small prayer for Sarah. She's the one who actually has it hard."
Thanks so much for listening to 700 PSI. Stories like Harvey's remind me that even when we make questionable decisions, there's guidance out there that's bigger than our mistakes. If you're new here, hi, I'm Dawn. I hope you enjoyed this story. There are other Christian fiction stories here on the channel. I hope you find something else you like too. Until then, stay safe, keep the faith, and have a blessed week.